Tonight is all about healthy and vital. And really, this is a bit of a passion of mine, right? Because I feel like to a large degree, we've been sold a bit of a pup when it comes to our health, right? I feel like we've been sold this story about our bodies and about our health that just isn't true, okay? And so I'll explain what I mean as we go along, but I'll start this by, I guess, sharing a bit of my journey, which is that I wasn't always all that healthy. I was never terribly sick growing up, but I was never healthy growing up either. Like I was just always getting sick, like coughs, colds, and infections. I would say growing up, from my teen years onwards at the very least, I was on antibiotics about half a dozen times a year. Right, I was asthmatic. I was always needed the asthma puffer, and I just wasn't healthy. Right, I didn't really know what healthy was, and this was no fault of my parents. Like my parents were great. They did all the best they could with what they knew. They had us really being quite sugar free well before that was kind of a thing. Mum was always cooking home cooked meals, trying to do what she thought was right, probably following the food pyramid because that's what she was told was right. And but I just wasn't that healthy, and it wasn't really until I discovered chiropractic that changed. And I remember going to see my first few chiropractors and talking to them about this idea, this chiropractic philosophy, this different idea around what was health and what was normal in terms of the function of our bodies, that it started to change. And the more I sort of got immersed in this chiropractic community and went to seminars and learnt from chiropractors, the more I realized that there was a different way of thinking about health and there was a different way of thinking about the body. And I liked it. It made a lot of sense and it was much more positive and hopeful and purposeful. And it just made sense to me. It had a bit more personal responsibility, and I liked it. And so this is what these chiropractors taught me, right? And it was this chiropractic philosophy that really shapes everything else I do now. People ask me how my chiropractic philosophy shapes me and my life. And I now teach chiropractic. In fact, I've got my ACC jumper on today. I now teach chiropractic philosophy at the Australian Chiropractic College here in Adelaide, which is super exciting, something I'm so passionate about because I had a small part in the creation of the college because I'm really passionate about this idea of teaching proper chiropractic philosophy and teaching proper health philosophy and the impact that might have not just on chiropractors, but on the world and society as a whole, right? And so that's why I do what I do, because, I was going to seminars and listening to these amazing chiropractors, hearing this amazing health philosophy. And what I found was I'd go in there, I'd get all excited, and then I'd walk out the doors and realize that no one else knew it. It was like a bit of a secret. And then I realized that then it needed to become more mainstream, and we needed to be able to share this with the world beyond just chiropractic care. We needed to share this vitalistic, holistic view of health with the rest of the world. And so that's what I've been doing for the last couple of decades. And that's what this talk is really all about. And so I'm going to start by sharing with you a little bit about this chiropractic philosophy, just to help you understand the basics, right? And so this chiropractic philosophy is based on the idea that your body is innately healthy. That your body knows what to do in order to heal. And you can think of this really simply, which is that if I get a cut on my arm, my body knows what to do, right? It knows how to heal it to get it back on track, unless there's something interfering with that process, okay? And so this idea that our bodies are innately healthy is such a simple idea. It makes so much sense. I can explain that to my 3-year-old and he gets it. Yet in health, it's a controversial idea, okay? And we'll talk about that a little bit later as to why that might be controversial. But really, medicine kind of gives us the idea that it's all down to, bad luck, bad germs, and bad genes, right? It's just unlucky. You just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and there was nothing you could do about it, right? But we know that our bodies do stuff about it all the time, all day, every day. They're designed to do it. They've evolved over millions of years to do it. And when it's not happening, then usually that means there's something interfering with that, okay? And usually, often, there's something we can do about that. And we're going to talk about that as we get further in as well, all right? And so our bodies are innately healthy. Our bodies are designed to be healthy. The challenge with that is that our modern lives are inherently stressful. We live in a world that is stressful to our bodies. And often we think about that and we think, well, yeah, but life has always been stressful. And that's true, right? Like if you were a caveman around the time of the dinosaurs, were people even around when the dinosaurs? Anyway, if you were a caveman way back when there were megafauna around, right? Like that would be stressful, getting chased around by these enormous animals, right? And so, and they had traumatic, stressful lives, but it was often acute trauma. Okay, it was like you either get away from the saber-toothed tiger or you don't, and either way, you get to sort of then relax and switch off, or you don't need to worry about it. And so it wasn't acute, it wasn't chronic stress. And I think what we see more often than not in our modern lives is chronic stress. Right? So I'd love for you guys to put into the chat box, what stresses you out, and we'll chat about that and have a look at those as to whether they are acute stresses or whether they are chronic stresses. All right, so put into the chat, let me know what tends to stress you out. And I'll talk a little bit about what some of the common ones are, right? And so what commonly we'll see here is time, is money, right? Is family, all right? Is relationships, is work, is social media, is diet, right? And these are all things that don't come and go, right? It's not like if you're stressed about money today, there's a good chance you're going to be stressed about money tomorrow. And it doesn't need to be the case, but it often is, right? There's a good chance you'll still be stressed about money in 6 months' time, or even 12 months' time, or possibly even years' time, right? The same tends to be true for time, right? Now, this is not to say that we can't do stuff about it, but if we look back, at what we're stressed about now and ask ourselves, well, was I stressed about that a year ago? Was I stressed about that 5 years ago? Often the answer is yes. And these are often chronic stresses that have a chronic effect on our bodies, okay? And these stresses can lead to dis-ease, right? And subluxations in your spine, okay? And so as chiropractors, we talk about subluxations. That is a dysfunction in your spine, a misalignment in your spine that then causes interference to your nervous system and causes what we call dis-ease. Now, I'm going to write that word in the chat box just so you can see, because this is a concept that chiropractors talk about a lot, but often it gets a bit misunderstood, okay? And so people say, chiropractors are saying subluxation causes all disease. And that's not necessarily true, but what it does cause is dis-ease, a lack of ease in your body. This is a state that isn't necessarily related to disease or pathology in your body, right? It's not necessarily a named condition or a named disorder, but it's a state of less ease. Your body isn't functioning as well as it could be, or perhaps as well as it should be. Your body isn't performing as well as it should be. It's not as resilient or as adaptable as it should be, okay? And as a result, that can have long-term consequences. And sometimes that will lead to a disease, but other times it'll just lead to dysfunction, to deterioration, to degeneration in terms of your body and cause problems further down the line, even though it's not necessarily at that stage yet, even though it's not necessarily symptomatic yet. The example we often use about this is to consider, for example, heart disease. And what we know is that for over half of all heart attacks, the first symptom people notice is the heart attack that kills them. Okay? Which raises the question then, well, with heart attack, should we just be worried about symptoms, or should we be looking at dis-ease? Should we be looking for dysfunction, right? Because if 50% of the time, by the time you get a symptom, it's too late, then we need to start looking at what's happening before that so that we can promote health rather than just waiting for disease, so that we can restore ease where there is dis-ease rather than waiting for it to become a named condition, okay? And so these stresses can lead to subluxations. That can be one of the effects of those, is misalignment in your spine, which causes interference to your nervous system. And that's what we focus on as chiropractors, right? Our job as chiropractors is to figure out whether you have a subluxation, if you have a subluxation, to help you remove it, and then to talk to you about how to stop recreating that problem in the future, to prevent the recurrence of these problems. And to a large degree, that's what I talk about in a lot of these talks that I do, is about stopping you from recreating these problems in the future and removing the stressors that are causing these problems, these subluxations, as well as other problems in your spine and also in your body and in your health, right? It is helping you get from a state of dis-ease back to a state of ease, because we know that when your body is at ease, the way that it performs is far greater than you've been led to believe, right? It's way better at healing than people have been led to believe. It's way better at performing, at functioning, energy, immunity, all of those things are actually very, very good, okay? And so what we think of as normal health is what's common, right? And we know that about 80% of people in our society suffer from some kind of chronic disease, some kind of long-term health condition, And we know that about 80% of those are lifestyle related. And so we start to think that that's normal. It's normal to be dysfunctional. It's normal to be tired. It's normal to be stressed. It's normal to be sick. We start thinking of all of those things, all of those states of disease or dis-ease as being normal, when the reality couldn't be further from the truth. Okay. And so this is what we do as chiropractors. And so, this all started, this idea that our bodies are innately healthy. In chiropractic, we talk about that and we call that innate intelligence. That is one of the early principles of chiropractic, right? Wasn't created by chiropractors, wasn't created by chiropractic. It had been around for a very long time. In fact, D.D. Palmer, who was the original chiropractor, gave the first adjustment. Incidentally, first adjustment, not for back pain, neck pain, and headaches, as people often think is the case. It was actually restored hearing in a guy called Harvey Lillard, who was his janitor. He bent over one day to pick something up, heard a pop in his spine, and ever since had been deaf for years. In fact, decades, I believe, had been deaf. And so D.D. Palmer thought, well, that's interesting. If the dysfunction in your spine came about at the same time as the hearing loss, then maybe if he restored the function of his spine, then that might help improve things. And it did. And of course, the first thought was, well, maybe I found a cure for hearing loss, but subsequently they realized that wasn't the case. But that there was something that happened. When you restored the function of the spine and removed the interference from the nervous system, something happened and bodies just tended to function better, right? The second adjustment was for someone who had a heart issue. And a similar story, right? When the interference to the nervous system was removed, they functioned better. And so this is how chiropractic came about. But like I said, it wasn't based on chiropractic. Manipulation of the spine had been around for hundreds and thousands of years prior to that, right? The ideas, the philosophies had been around since the Greeks in the term of things like vitalism. The idea that the body is just more than the sum of its parts, and there's an intelligence there, there's a wisdom there somewhere that it just seems to know what to do, and some people think of that from a religious context, but it certainly doesn't need to be. We talk about the idea of, the idea they had back then, they called it vis medicae naturae, the idea that the healing power of nature, that somehow there'd been an evolution of our bodies, and of course there had been, because this is how evolution works, right? Our bodies had evolved over time to be better and better suited to their environment, and as a result, better and better at adapting, repairing, regenerating, healing, right? There was this vitality within the body. The winners of evolution gradually got more and more vital, better and better at dealing with the stresses of the world. And as a result, there was the inherited intelligence there that knew what to do. And so D.D. did borrow that from the Greeks and from other sources as well. And come up with this idea that, the body was somehow self-regulating, self-healing, was able to maintain overall health. And once again, when we say maintain overall health, it doesn't sound very exciting when you just think about maintaining health. That sounds like a kind of bare minimum you'd want to be able to do, right? But when you, I think, really understand what health is and what the body is capable of when it is healthy, then it becomes a lot more exciting, right? And it starts to talk to people's purpose, their life purpose. It's about having energy. It's about having vitality. It's about performing. It's about being able to do what you want to do in the sports arena, in the work arena, with your family, in the garden, at golf, wherever that may be, whatever it is that floats your boat. It's about having a body that is really able to perform at a very high level and able to do what you would love to be able to do. Okay, and so we then start to get to this idea of what we call salutogenesis. Okay, and once again, this is not created by chiropractors, but often talked about by chiropractors. And salutogenesis is the idea of health being about health promotion, not just about disease treatment. So salutogenesis as opposed to what's called pathogenesis, right, which is more the medical model, right, more the modern model of health that often gets used. And that is the idea that, we kind of wait until we get an identifiable disease or symptom, and then we try and treat that disease or symptom. And when that disease or symptom goes away, we consider our job done. And that's a very different approach to health, to salutogenesis, because salutogenesis, as I said, is about health promotion. Pathogenesis has the idea that it's all down to bad luck, bad germs, or bad genes. Okay, and that it really is just unfortunate that your body is not strong enough and not capable enough to deal with those things, and as a result has ended up sick. And that the only way you can get better is from the outside in, right? Is from an outside source, a doctor, a practitioner, a medication to come in and fix you and get rid of those symptoms and to get rid of that disease, right? Salutogenesis is different. It's about promoting health from the inside out. It's about creating a more resilient body, creating a more adaptable body, a higher functioning body that's then better able to deal with the challenges of the world around us, okay? It's proactive, it's preventative, right? It's not about waiting until you get a symptom. It's not about waiting until you get a disease. It's about acting anyway, okay? It's about acting to promote the optimal performance and function of your body so that whatever happens, whether it is a stress or a challenge, whether it is a bad luck, a bad germ, or a bad gene, right? And gene often, when we talk about that, I'm talking about epigenetics, not just genetics, and I'll talk about that in a second too. But it's about our body's ability to be ready for the challenges that come along, and it's about our body's ability to be ready for the opportunities that come along so that we can perform at a very high level in our life, okay? And so salutogenesis, once again, views health as a continuum, right? Rather than the kind of black and white world view that we see so often nowadays, which is that you're sick or you're not. The person who, the day before they had their heart attack was healthy. How often you hear this story, it gets in the news because it seems extraordinary that the healthy person who was, fit and healthy and ate well and ran and jogged and did all the right things suddenly dropped dead of a heart attack, right? And the conversation there is that a healthy person dropped dead of a heart attack. And to me, that doesn't make sense. Certainly from a salutogenic model, it doesn't make sense, right? Unless something happened that was so traumatic that body could not possibly deal with it, the greater likelihood is that body wasn't functioning as well as it could be, that it was in a state of dis-ease. And as a result, that person was more susceptible to the normal stresses, the normal challenges of life, okay? And so salutogenic health views health as a continuum, that it's not just black and white. You're not just sick or not. You don't just have symptoms or not. You're not just healthy or sick, that there's a continuum there, and that you can be less healthy, that you can have less ease in your body, that you can have less function in your body, even if you don't have symptoms, even if you don't have an identifiable, diagnosable condition, even if it's not showing up yet in your blood test or whatever other tests you may like to have. It's possible that your body isn't functioning as well as it can be, and maybe we just don't have the right tests yet, right? Because if you look back even just 5 or 10 years, there are tests that we have now that we didn't have then, that weren't able to show the disease or the dysfunction or the disorder that we have, that we are able to investigate and we're able to measure now. Okay, so it's changing all the time, and sometimes we confuse what we know with the truth. We confuse the model of the world we've got now, the model that allows us to get the best available picture we've got now. We confuse that with the truth, when in reality it's just the best model we've got now. And later on in 5, 10, 20 years time, we're going to learn more, we're going to be able to test for more, we're going to be able to do more, and we're going to realize, those people we thought were healthy, they actually weren't. There was some dysfunction, some disorder, some imbalance going on there that we just didn't realize was there, right? And so health as a continuum is a really important concept. We need to start understanding that there are shades of grey when it comes to our health, and that it is a continuum that we can move up and down, and that primarily what moves us up and down is what we do, is our lifestyle, right? The way we eat, the way we think, the way we move can help us move up and down that continuum. And ultimately, a salutogenic approach to health is a much more holistic approach to health, right? It's understanding that if one cell in your body is sick, then your body is sick, right? If one cell in your body is not communicating properly, then your body is not communicating properly. That everything is linked to everything, and that we can't just compartmentalize the body and investigate one aspect of the body, maybe even treat one aspect of the body, without understanding the consequences that has for the entire rest of the body, okay? And what that means in terms of an approach to health is that if there is a problem in one area, we don't just look at that area, right, in order to determine what is the cause. We look at the whole body and determine what is the cause. And we do this all the time as chiropractors, right? Like the classic saying chiropractors will sometimes use is, if there's crooked foundations, there can be cracks in the ceiling, right? And what we mean by that is we want to look at your pelvis, even though you've got an upper neck issue, because we know that if the foundation down the bottom isn't right, then that can cause distortions and problems elsewhere, further up the chain. Right? And the reverse can be true as well. All right? And so often we see people in practice where they say, look, I've got this shoulder problem. I've been working on this shoulder, I've been treating the shoulder, I've been rehabbing the shoulder, I've been exercising it, stretching it, massaging it, dry needling it, everything. but it's just not getting better. And what we see when we look at that person is a global postural, spinal, neurological issue that is predisposing that shoulder problem that hasn't been dealt with, and as a result, this person hasn't been getting the results that they're looking for. Right? And so this is where this holistic view is really important in terms of determining the cause of the problem, and it's really important in terms of determining the actions we take, the solutions that we create, because if we're just treating that one area and not understanding the impact that treatment has on the other areas of the body, then that's gonna, then we may be actually causing more problems than we're solving, right? We may be causing more problems in other areas whilst we're treating this problem in one area, okay? So it's important. Salutogenic is a holistic approach. It's about looking at the whole body to determine the cause and about looking at the whole body to determine the solution. And so what this looks like is really, it means we need to look at our lifestyle, okay? It means that we need to look at sufficiency and toxicity, okay? Sufficiency means we're getting enough of what we need, right? Toxicity means we're getting too much of what we don't need. And really those are the two problems we have when it comes to our lifestyle, okay? So we can think about this in terms of mental, emotional, right? Sufficiency, are we getting enough positive thoughts? Are we doing enough gratitude? Are we doing enough journaling? Are we doing enough, goal setting and planning and rewarding ourselves and congratulating ourselves and all of these sort of positive thoughts? Are we doing enough happiness? Are we doing enough laughter? Are we doing enough love and joy, right? Are we doing sufficiency when it comes to our mental, emotional state, right? And then obviously toxicity, right? Where am I stressing out more than I should be? Where am I deviating away from present time consciousness? Where am I deviating away from mindfulness and getting stressed about what happened in the past and worrying about what happens in the future, right? Am I getting overly stressed about my finances, about my money, about my job, about my relationships, about any of those aspects? What's stressing me out? What's causing a toxic stress? Do I need to remove myself from that situation, or do I need to just change my perspective around that situation? I found that Byron Katie's work on loving what is was very useful, and her book Loving What Is, and the audiobook even better, was very useful in terms of helping me be mindful and present, but also about helping me just love what is, realizing I don't necessarily need to change things. Often I just need to change my perspective around things. And then from the chemical side, right, we need to make sure that we're getting sufficiency. Mostly that's about getting healthy, whole foods and good, clean water, right? It is getting the foods in the appropriate ratios that our body requires. Now, everyone's going to have different ideas around what that looks like. You probably know that I do mostly a paleo diet, and I find that makes the most sense for me from this evolutionary perspective, right? This idea that my body's designed to be healthy, and I just need to give it what it needs and none of what it doesn't. Then the flow on from that for me is that what we ate from an evolutionary perspective, what we were eating when we were evolving to become these incredible beings that we are right now, it makes sense that would be what we would need to eat in order to maintain that state and to stay healthy. And so that's where the chemical sufficiency comes in. And then the chemical toxicity, of course, can be foods that exist outside of that sphere, foods that are not natural, that our bodies aren't designed to eat, that aren't suitable for our bodies. There's been some really interesting research, for example, coming out about artificial sweeteners just recently. The World Health Organization, if you've listened to my podcast, you'll know that the World Health Organization have just changed their recommendations around artificial sweeteners because they realized that they weren't doing what they said they were going to do. They weren't helping people lose weight. They were, in fact, increasing people's risk of diabetes, of heart disease, of overall mortality, because they're just not natural, right? They're not what our bodies are designed to consume. Our bodies were designed to consume carbs and sugar, albeit in much more moderate quantities than what exists in our standard American or standard Australian diet. But that's what our bodies are designed to consume, not the artificial sweeteners, right? And so removing these chemical toxicities, whether that be foods, obviously, junk foods and those sort of things, or whether that be chemicals in your environment. That might be cleaners, that might be beauty products, that might be, things leaching out of your clothes, things leaching out of your bed, it might be Wi-Fi, it might be all of those sort of chemical irritants that we have, or those irritants that we have in our environment, okay? Similarly, we can look at movement in the same way. Are we getting sufficient movement? And often, the government recommendation is half hour of walking a day, and that's enough. And I don't think that is sufficient movement. That's not the movement we evolved with. I think we evolved with a lot more well-rounded movement. That yes, we got some cardio, but we also had resistance. We also did mobility. We also did dance and song. We moved a lot more, I think, traditionally, and with a lot more variety, especially traditionally, than just 30 minutes of walking a day. And so I think that movement is what our bodies are naturally evolved to require. I think it's a very functional whole body movement. It wasn't using machines. It wasn't isolating one individual muscle. It was about using your whole body in a healthy way. And so I think that's what we should be thinking about in terms of sufficient movement, whole body movements, healthy movements on a regular basis, not just walking, but lifting, pushing, pulling, squatting, right? All of these movements that I think are essential for our bodies in order to be healthy and to perform well. And so toxicity in terms of movement is, I guess, doing the opposite of that, right? Sitting is probably the biggest one. They say your average office worker sits for 16 hours a day. And so as a result, sitting is a big stressor on our bodies. In fact, research now suggesting sitting might be worse than smoking, which is extraordinary when you think about it. But it doesn't surprise me either. All right, and so that's probably the biggest one we need to be mindful of, is sitting and bad posture. Both of those I think we need to be really mindful of in terms of a toxicity, in terms of movement in our bodies. But also I think just exercising with bad form and bad technique and bad posture definitely contributes to that. And exercising in a way that creates imbalance in our body. And often that is isolating one particular muscle and training that without at the same time, by doing whole body movement, without activating the co-requisite muscles that go with it. This is building up really strong arms, but not developing the core stability to be able to use it in a healthy way. And often that happens when we do just isolate those individual muscles. So that's movement, right? Sleep sufficiency and toxicity is, I think, pretty obvious and pretty straightforward. But, getting your 7 or 8 hours sleep at night, getting quality sleep at night is pretty simple in terms of your sufficiency. The toxicity, I think, can come into quality of sleep, and that can be affected by things like stimulants, coffee, alcohol, screen time, blue light, what you do just before you go to bed, social media, notifications, all sorts of things that can be toxic to your sleep that we need to be mindful of. And that can include your diet, that can be including issues with breathing, all sorts of things that can be toxic to your sleep patterns as well. Once again, relationships. We are by nature tribal creatures, and we are designed to have relationships. And those relationships are really important for our bodies and for our brains and for our health. And so making sure we've got those healthy relationships, making sure we surround ourselves with people who are positive and beneficial to us. Making sure that we make time to build those relationships and to spend time with friends and to spend time with family, I think is really important. And making sure we're aware of toxic relationships in our lives and what they may look like and how we can manage those and how we can either, once again, remove ourselves from that situation or minimize the amount of time we're in that situation or change our perspective around that situation, I think is really important in terms of reducing that toxicity. And then, of course, neurology. And we've spoken about that already, but this is what we do as chiropractors, is making sure that there is no interference to the nervous system, primarily through chiropractic adjustments, right? By realigning your spine, by reorganizing your spine to remove that interference from your nervous system so that your brain can talk to your body better and your body can talk to your brain better. And that's a really important part of ensuring that you are healthy and vital and that your body is functioning as well as it can be. So, that's about removing that toxicity to your nervous system. It's not the only toxicity to your nervous system, right? So, other things, inflammation can interfere with your nervous system. Insults, tumors, bacterial infections, other things can interfere with your nervous system, and it's important that you look at and address those too. However, one of the biggest ones, and one of the ones that we can most easily address, is dysfunction in your spine causing interference to your nervous system. And that's what we do as chiropractors, right? Also, sufficiency for your nervous system. That of course involves making sure you're stimulating your nervous system, and that's where exercise can be really important, coupled with chiropractic, to make sure you're getting the full benefit, make sure those joints are functioning well and those nerve messages are getting back to your brain well to get the full benefit from that exercise. But also things like magnesium in your diet to help de-stress your nervous system. Magnesium primarily from dark leafy green vegetables and nuts is the best way to get that magnesium in. And that can really help de-stress your nervous system and take the pressure off of your neurology as well. Okay, and so anything that really reduces inflammation can be beneficial to your nervous system and to your brain as well. Making sure you're getting healthy fats is an important sufficiency in terms of your nervous system, because your brain is predominantly fat. And so getting healthy fats into your diet can be a really important part there as well. And so, these are the sufficiencies and toxicities we need to look at in order to ensure that we are allowing our body to be at a proper state of ease, to have a proper state of health, and more than that, to have a proper state of vitality, right? To get the real benefits of what is an extraordinary body that we have, and to get the optimal, the normal level of health that our bodies are designed to have. All right? And so it's important to recognize here that that's not to say that there aren't limitations of matter. Okay, so this is a principle we have in chiropractic as well, is limitations of matter. And this is the idea that there are some stresses that our body isn't able to deal with. Okay, and that may be because our bodies aren't at a full state of health and vitality, or it might just be that those stresses are just too big. All right? The example I often use when I'm talking to my chiropractic students is that if I walk out the front here and get hit by a bus, that might be more than my body's able to deal with. Right? That might cause negative ramifications, and the trauma that happens to my body as a result of that may be more than my body's able to deal with and able to heal from. Right? So there may always be remnants of that trauma in my body. Right? It might damage my body in an irrevocable way. Right. Similarly, our genetics can be damaged in an irrevocable way, and that can be through our lifetime, but that can also be through previous lifetimes. Right, the genetics we've inherited can have been damaged through the lifestyles of our ancestors. Right, and the epigenetics, the ability of us to use those genes. Right, so epigenetics are the proteins that surround your genes and determine which genes you use, which sometimes can be more important than which genes you have. And they are predominantly affected by your lifestyle, but they can also be affected by the lifestyle of your ancestors. We've now seen studies showing that people whose grandparents smoked are more likely to have ill health in their lifetime as a result of those epigenetic factors, which is amazing and fascinating, but also important to be mindful of, in that, I think that we should be taking a lot more personal responsibility in our health, as you can probably guess from this, in terms of our health and vitality. There's a lot that we can do to help encourage our normal state of health and vitality. And it's important to recognize that sometimes there's nothing we can do about it, right? That sometimes, as a result of these limitations of matter, as a result of inherited epigenetic factors, as a result of inherited genetic factors, as a result of traumas that are more than our bodies are able to deal with, as a result of chronic lifestyles, sometimes chronic lifestyles that we didn't even realize were a problem until we learnt better, that there may be some damage that has been done that can't be undone. There may be a limitation of matter. The easiest way to think about this is think about, if I lost my thumb, whatever, I'm mucking around, I'm chopping, I'm working in the work shed and I accidentally chop off my thumb. I'm not going to grow back another one, right? As clever as my body is, as amazing as my body is, there are some things that my body can't undo. And so it's important that we recognize these limitations of matter, because for some people, they can be significant and they can really challenge their ability to heal. I think for most people, no matter the limitations of matter, there's stuff that you could be doing, and most people I think know this, there's stuff that you could be doing in terms of your lifestyle, in terms of eating well, in terms of thinking well, in terms of moving well, in terms of removing interference to your nervous system, in terms of sleeping better, that would actually allow you to function better, allow you to have more of your innate health potential and more of that incredible ability to heal than you currently have, even in spite of the limitations of matter that may well be there, right? And so I think it's important that when we look from this salutogenic perspective, we recognize that there is a lot that we can do in order to create health. And if that's something you want to do, and if that's something you'd love help with, obviously, we love helping with that. If you want to come in and see us at Healthy Choices Chiropractic, we'd love to investigate your spine and nervous system and see whether there's any interference there to your nervous system. And at the same time, we'd love to talk to you about some of those other lifestyle factors and how you might be able to manage and mitigate those as well. All right. So that's everything from me tonight. Those are my kind of 5 steps to health and vitality. Obviously, there are a lot of sub-steps in there. I will put the notes to this into the Healthy Lifestyle Choices group, which if you're not a member of that, I'll put a link into In fact, I should have put the link in here. I'll put the link into the description of this video in just a moment. And you'll be able to join that Healthy Lifestyle Choices group. You'll be able to see this recording in there once it's been edited up. You'll be able to see the notes from today's session, as well as my podcast, all my other videos organized in a nice categoric way so they're easy to find. And that's the best spot to go if you've got questions for me. If you're watching this video, especially if you're watching this on the replay, the best spot to go to ask questions and get me to answer them is into that Healthy Lifestyle Choices group. So I hope you've enjoyed that this evening. I hope you have a wonderful evening. If you've got any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to jump out, love you and leave you, and look forward to chatting to you again soon.